know what that is right there? The finish line. All this area over here, done, waste, backfilled. But this right here is the line of pay. And you can see there's not much left. And that is a damn good feeling, my man.
Yeah.
$15 million. That's what Parker Schnabel risked on Dominion Creek. Machines, fuel, and his future. No casino, just frozen dirt and cold steel. One wrong move and everything could crumble. This is the story of that gamble, and the final weigh-in that decides if Parker wins big or loses it all. The anatomy of a necessary gamble. You don't bet $15 million on a whim. You do it when the alternative is worse. For years, Parker Schnabel had been a mining prodigy, a young force tearing through the Yukon, pulling gold from claims that others had overlooked. But the ground, like time, is finite. His operations at Scribner Creek, once the bedrock of his success, were thinning out. The easy gold was gone. The pay dirt was becoming scarcer, the returns diminishing with every yard of earth moved. The crew could feel it. The days were just as long, the work just as hard, but the gleam in the sluice boxes was fading. Parker was facing a classic Klondike dilemma: go big or go home.
I would call that your last.
I think that's it. That's the last one right there.
Oh my, I'm actually out of dirt.
Yeah!
Yeah, we're done!
Downsizing meant letting go of loyal crew members, men and women who had become family. It meant scaling back the ambition that had defined him since he first took the reins from his grandfather, John Schnabel. For Parker, that was a kind of failure he couldn't accept. The other option was to leap, to find a piece of ground so rich, so vast, that it could sustain them for years to come. That ground was Dominion Creek. Dominion wasn't a secret. It was a legendary claim, known for its deep pay layers. But that depth was also its curse. 40 feet of frozen, worthless overburden sat on top of the gold. To get to the pay, you had to move millions of cubic yards of this frozen muck. It was an engineering challenge of colossal proportions, requiring a fleet of heavy machinery running around the clock, burning through thousands of gallons of diesel every single day. The upfront cost was astronomical. The land itself was a multi-million-dollar purchase. Then came the equipment, the dozers, the rock trucks, the excavators, and the payroll for a crew large enough to run a 24/7 operation.
Chris, you got a copy, Chris. We are ready for the cleanup down here at Roxanne. The last of the materials going through the plant right now.
The $15 million figure wasn't pulled from thin air. It was a cold, hard calculation of what it would take just to break even in the first year. It was a loan, a line of credit, a weight on Parker's shoulders that he carried into every decision. Every breakdown wasn't just a delay. It was money burning. Every strategic choice about where to strip ground, where to place the wash plant, had multi-million-dollar consequences. The pressure was immense, a constant low-grade hum of anxiety beneath the roar of the engines. He wasn't just a miner anymore. He was the CEO of a massive, high-risk startup, and his investors were waiting. Machines move dirt, but people move machines. Parker's crew was the living, breathing heart of the Dominion operation. They were the ones who endured the brutal 12-hour shifts, the biting wind, and the relentless mud. At the top of the chain of command was Tyson, the foreman, a man whose calm demeanor belied a sharp, tactical mind. He was the one translating Parker's grand strategy into the practical, minute-by-minute movements of men and steel on the cut. And then there was Mitch, a workhorse of a man whose loyalty to Parker was etched into every long day he put in. Mitch represented the core of the team, the guys who show up, do the work, and ask what's next. The season had been a grinder, a 6-month marathon that had taken them all away from their families, from birthdays, from life outside the bubble of the mine site. One afternoon, with the season winding down and the final push in full swing, A moment occurred that revealed more about the operation than any gold total could. Parker found Mitch, covered in grease and dirt, his face etched with fatigue. He knew Mitch's daughter had a birthday coming up, a milestone he was set to miss. In a move that defied the cutthroat logic of the gold business, Parker told him to go, to pack his bags, get in his truck, and drive the long road home. "You've got a pregnant wife and a daughter's birthday to get home to, don't you?" Parker asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mitch was stunned. Leaving early during the most critical part of the season was unheard of. But Parker insisted. "You guys fought through. You've put in a hell of a season. Get out of here." It was a small act, but it was everything. It was an acknowledgement of the human cost. It told the crew that Parker saw their sacrifices, that he understood their lives extended beyond the boundaries of Dominion Creek. It was an investment in loyalty, more valuable than any piece of equipment. As Mitch drove away, a sense of relief and gratitude settled over the remaining crew. They knew their boss, despite the crushing pressure on him, still saw them as people, not just parts of a machine. That kind of leadership is what turns a group of employees into a team willing to go to war for you. The beast at the center of it all. To handle the giant job at Dominion Creek, Parker knew he needed a monster. He found one and named it Roxanne. Roxanne was his huge wash plant, a machine so big it looked like a building made of metal. It wasn't just a simple machine, it was the heart of the whole mine. Imagine a towering structure made of steel beams, long moving belts, and giant metal screens. It was built to do just one job, to pull tiny precious flakes of gold out of giant piles of rock and dirt. The whole thing worked like a team, with each machine playing its part. It was a mix of powerful machines and careful work. It started with the giant excavators. These digging machines were like giant metal dinosaurs. With huge metal claws, they would dig deep into the ground to get to the pay dirt. Pay dirt is the special layer of gravel and sand where gold has been hiding for thousands of years. It's the dirt that pays the bills. The excavator operator had to be very skillful. If they dug too high, they would just get worthless dirt. If they dug too low, they would be wasting time. They had to get it just right. Each time the excavator's bucket scooped up the pay dirt, it would swing around and dump it into the back of a rock truck. These weren't regular trucks. They were massive, heavy-duty vehicles, and each load they carried weighed as much as 10 elephants. The rock truck drivers then had a difficult job. They had to drive on slippery, muddy roads that were carved into the side of the mine. One wrong move and a truck could slip or get stuck, which would stop the whole operation. They drove carefully to the bottom of Roxanne, where the real washing would begin. At the base of the wash plant, the pile of pay dirt didn't stay dry for long. A crew member would aim a huge water cannon called a monitor at the pile. This machine shot out a powerful stream of water, like a fire hose but much stronger. The water blasted the hard, packed dirt, turning it into a thick, muddy soup. This soup is called a slurry. Making the slurry was important because you can't find gold in hard dirt. You have to mix it with water so it can flow and be sorted. This muddy river of slurry was then pushed up a long ramp and dumped onto the top of Roxanne. This is where the sorting started. The first stop was a set of big shaking screens called the shaker deck. Think of it like a giant kitchen strainer. The screens would shake back and forth very fast, making a loud rumbling noise that you could feel in your feet. As the muddy water flowed over the shaking screens, all the big rocks, bigger than a baseball, would get bounced right off. They would fall down a chute and land in a huge pile next to the machine. These were the waste rocks, and by the end of the season, this pile would be as big as a hill. But the smaller bits of rock, sand, and gold were small enough to fall through the holes in the screen. This material, still mixed with water, then flowed into long metal channels called sluice boxes. The sluice boxes are the most important part of the whole machine. The bottom of these channels was lined with special rubber mats that had grooves and ridges called miner's moss. Here is where the magic of gold mining happens, and it's all because gold is very heavy. It's much heavier than sand or rock of the same size. As the muddy water rushed through the sluice boxes, the light sand and small rocks were easily washed along and flowed right out the end of the machine. But the heavy gold flakes would sink to the bottom. They would get caught in the ridges of the miner's moss, trapped like coins in the thick carpet of a car. For this to work, the water had to be flowing at just the right speed. Too slow, and the sluice box would fill up with mud. Too fast, and the water could pick up the gold and wash it away with the waste rocks. For months, Roxanne had roared and rumbled without stopping, day and night. The sound was the first thing the crew heard in the morning and the last thing they heard at night. It was the sound of work, the sound of progress, the sound of money being spent to hopefully find gold. But now, that sound was gone. The roaring had stopped. A strange, heavy quiet fell over the mine site. The crew stood at the edge of the money pit, the huge hole in the ground they had spent all season digging. They were done. "You know what that is right there? The finish line," one of the crew members said. He pointed to a clear line in the dirt. On one side was the bottom of the pit they had dug out. On the other side was the wall of dirt they had not touched. There was no more pay dirt to dig. The excavator operator, in a slow, careful move, scooped up the very last bucket of dirt. Everyone stopped to watch. It was a special moment. He gently dumped the final load into Roxanne's hopper. The water pumps ran for a few more minutes, washing the last bits of dirt through the system. Then, everything was shut down. The silence was almost deafening. The only sound left was the cold wind blowing through the valley. They had done all they could. The big bet was now out of their hands. The answer to whether their hard work had paid off was now locked away inside the metal guts of Roxanne. The walk to the gold room felt different this time. It wasn't just the end of a long week, it was the end of the whole season. This was the final test. The whole crew, even the mechanics and truck drivers who were usually busy with other jobs, gathered outside the small locked building. You could see the hope and the tiredness on their faces. They had done their part, working through the cold and the mud for 6 long months. Now, it was up to Parker and his gold room expert Chris to count the score. Inside the small, secure room, the final cleanup began. First, they had to get the miners' moss mats out of the sluice boxes. This was hard work. The mats were heavy with water and packed with black sand and, hopefully, gold. They carefully lifted them out and carried them over to large tubs. They used hoses to wash the mats very carefully, making sure every single speck of the trapped material, called concentrate, fell into the tubs. This dark, heavy mud was the most important stuff on the whole mine site. The air in the room was tense. You could almost feel it. Parker was quiet. He wasn't joking around like he usually did. He had a very serious look on his face. He knew the numbers in his head. To reach his season goal of 7,000 ounces, this final cleanup needed to have 174 ounces of gold. That was a good amount, and he felt it was possible. But to really prove that his $15 million bet was a smart one, he needed more than that. He needed a huge amount of gold. He needed a monster weigh-in. After the gold was separated, it was carefully scooped into a pan and dried with a torch. Finally, it was ready. The result was an amazing thing to see. It was a heavy, shining pile of pure Yukon gold. Parker took the first container of gold and carried it over to the digital scale. He set it down carefully. Outside, the crew pressed their faces against the small window, watching his every move. Everyone was holding their breath. Parker began to scoop the gold onto the scale. The red numbers on the screen started climbing fast. 40, 80, 120, 140, 170. He had already passed the 174 ounces he needed for his goal. A few nervous laughs and cheers came from the crew outside. A huge weight was lifted, but the numbers kept going up. 200, 240, 260. The scale finally stopped. 300 even. A huge cheer erupted from the crew. 300 ounces from just the first part of the cleanup was a fantastic result. But they weren't finished. There was another, bigger jar of gold from the rest of the cleanup. Parker carefully started adding this gold to the scale. 50, 100, 150, 180, 200, 220, 240. The final number flickered for a moment and then held steady. 254.35 ounces. Parker did the math out loud. The total for the week was 554.35 ounces. At the price of gold that day, it was worth over $1.1 million. They had earned over $1 million in a single week. It was the biggest cleanup of the entire season. The feeling of relief was huge. "Good purchase, man," said Tyson, the foreman, slapping Parker on the back. "Good place to call home." But the biggest number, the one that truly mattered, was the total for the whole season. Parker walked over to his laptop. He had kept a careful record of every weigh-in from the past 6 months. The crew went quiet again, watching him. He typed in the final numbers. He turned to the crew and said, "Our season total is 7,381.1 ounces for the season." The number seemed to hang in the air for a second. Then it sank in. 7,381.1 ounces. It was worth just under $15 million. They had done it. In one long, hard, and stressful season, they had found enough gold to earn back almost the entire amount of Parker's huge $15 million bet. The gamble hadn't just paid off. It had been a spectacular success. More than a paycheck. The celebration that followed wasn't just about the money. It was about survival and vindication. Parker, holding a bottle of champagne, addressed his team. His voice, usually so confident and assertive, cracked with emotion. This was for them. But first, he poured a bit onto the ground. A libation. "This is to those that helped you get started, those that helped you along the way but aren't here to share," he said. It was a silent tribute to his grandfather John, the man who had instilled in him the love for gold mining. Then came the real surprise. Parker reached into a box. He had taken some of the first gold they had mined from Dominion and had it melted down. Chris, the gold room expert, had crafted it into custom tokens, small, tangible pieces of their victory. He handed one to each crew member. "They're exchangeable for one meal at the kitchen," he joked. But everyone understood the real value. It wasn't just gold, it was a medal. It was proof that they had been there, that they had been part of the team that tamed Dominion Creek. The crew was visibly moved. One of them spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I speak for everybody here that thank you for finding us a home." That one word, home, captured the essence of the entire season. They weren't just nomadic miners anymore, chasing the dregs of a dying claim. They had a foundation. They had a future, a place where they could work for years to come. Parker, looking at the faces of his team, felt the full weight of the journey lift. "We started out in such a precarious position with ground," he reflected. "I'm just really relieved. We have an unreal project with an unreal group of people, and the ground's way better than anything we've mined before." The relief was not just financial, it was existential. He had secured their collective future. What do you think is the true measure of success in a place like the Klondike? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the gold rush.